What do you think of Whoopi Goldberg saying it's worse to be a black person in America today than a woman in Iran? I say we were talking about the trans issue before, and the New York Times really has come over on that to the sort of the sensible, liberal, not crazy woke position. I think this is a great first step toward getting the Democrats back to sanity, and a second good step would be we got to do something about The View. I really believe that. I mean, could you just
it's huge in Iran, though.
When I mentioned The View in Iran, all with the same head cover, you can't even tell which one is which.
It started with one sentence. On an episode of The View, Whoopi Goldberg responded to her co-host's comparison of life in America to life in Iran with a sharp retort, "Not if you're black." That single line exploded across social media, triggering debates, criticism, and eventually a scathing response from none other than Bill Maher. But what exactly happened, and why did it set off such a media storm? The original debate on The View was heated but not unusual for the show. The topic was the recent civil unrest in Iran, including the death of women for violating dress code laws and the broader crackdown on dissent by the Iranian government. Alyssa Farah Griffin pointed out how fortunate Americans were to live in a place with civil liberties, freedom of speech, and freedom of religion. She made a stark contrast between America and regimes like Iran's. Then Whoopi Goldberg cut in and delivered her now viral line, suggesting that for Black Americans, the feeling of oppression in the U.S. can be similar to that of Iranians living under a brutal theocracy. The table went silent for a moment. Griffin, stunned, tried to clarify that while racism is a serious issue, equating the two situations was not only an exaggeration, it was a dangerous one. The conversation turned awkward as the other hosts struggled to balance sensitivity toward racial injustice with the factual extremity of the Iranian regime's human rights abuses. But that wasn't the end of it. It was just the beginning. Because once clips of that moment went viral, the backlash was swift, and one of the loudest voices came from Bill Maher, who has made a career out of slamming political extremes on both sides. On his show Real Time, Maher played the clip and shook his head in disbelief. He said this was exactly the type of hyperbole that makes Americans look detached from the real suffering around the world. Then he went further, calling the entire panel of The View uninformed at best and dangerous at worst. Maher said if Democrats wanted to be taken seriously in 2025, they needed to stop letting platforms like The View define their discourse. His exact words? Do something about The View. It was a brutal line. And it wasn't just Maher's audience that responded. Political commentators, journalists, and even some celebrities weighed in. But one of the most striking responses came from someone who wasn't a household name until recently, Representative Wesley Hunt, a Black Republican from Texas. Hunt posted a video shortly after the controversy, saying that his family had gone from slavery to Congress in just 4 generations. He emphasized that his election to represent a majority white district was proof that while racism exists, it no longer defines Black life in America. He called Goldberg's comments harmful and said they minimize the very real struggles of people living under regimes like Iran's. What made Hunt's commentary particularly powerful was how he backed it with personal history. He talked about his father, a military veteran, and how their family valued education and service to the country. For him, America wasn't perfect, but it was a place of opportunity, a far cry from the world Goldberg seemed to describe. And his message resonated with a lot of people who felt that Goldberg had gone too far. Meanwhile, Iranian dissidents and refugees also began to speak out. Some appeared on podcasts, others wrote editorials, and their message was loud and clear. America is flawed, but it is not Iran. They talked about friends and family members imprisoned for simply removing their hijabs. They described the fear of surveillance, torture, and death that hangs over anyone who dares speak out in Iran. One woman, who escaped the country after being detained for participating in a protest, said hearing Goldberg's comments made her feel like her pain was being erased. Some even questioned why American media figures are so quick to draw false equivalences, arguing that it actually helps oppressive regimes by diluting the perception of how brutal they really are. These voices didn't come from political parties. They came from survivors, activists, and ordinary people who know firsthand what it's like to live in a country where dissent can get you killed. And that brings us back to Bill Maher. Maher isn't someone who shies away from controversial statements. In fact, he thrives on them, but in this case, he wasn't just trying to stir the pot. His frustration felt real, especially when he compared modern political discourse to a performance where some people are so eager to seem morally enlightened that they lose sight of the facts. He accused Goldberg of exactly that, of trying so hard to emphasize injustice that she made a false and harmful comparison. Maher's critics, of course, fired back. Some accused him of minimizing systemic racism in the United States. Others said he was punching down by attacking a show that's known for giving voice to liberal women. But even among the usual progressive defenders of the view, there was an unusual amount of silence. Perhaps because many realized this time Maher wasn't entirely wrong. In a follow-up discussion on Club Random, Maher elaborated on his feelings about the modern left. He said too many people were embracing narratives that sounded good but weren't based in reality. He argued that real activism requires clarity and truth, not hyperbole. And that includes acknowledging that Black Americans today live in a very different world than Iranian citizens under an authoritarian regime. There's also a larger conversation at play here, one that goes beyond just Whoopi Goldberg or Bill Maher. It's about the role of media, especially daytime talk shows, in shaping public opinion. Shows like The View reach millions of people every week, and with that influence comes responsibility. When hosts make sweeping claims, they can unintentionally set off political firestorms. And when those claims are built on shaky comparisons, they do more harm than good. This controversy also exposed a growing divide in how different generations and communities view oppression. For some, the legacy of slavery and Jim Crow laws still casts a long shadow. For others, the rise of Black political power, cultural dominance, and economic progress tells a different story. That tension is real, and moments like this bring it to the surface. Goldberg has not issued a formal apology, though she did later clarify that she wasn't saying America is exactly like Iran, only that the Black experience in America can feel just as oppressive at times. But even that clarification did little to calm the storm. For many, it felt like a doubling down rather than a walk back. And for others, it only raised more questions about how much weight should be given to feelings versus facts. In the end, this was more than just a media spat. It was a mirror held up to American discourse, revealing just how fractured, emotional, and complex conversations about race, identity, and international comparisons have become. It also showed how uncommon, especially from someone as influential as Whoopi Goldberg, can spark a nationwide reckoning. As for Bill Maher, he's moved on to other topics, as he always does. But the impact of this moment lingers. It forced viewers to confront uncomfortable truths about what we choose to compare and why. And it reminded everyone that words matter, especially when spoken from platforms that millions trust and watch. Whether you side with Maher, Goldberg, Hunt, or the dissidents who weighed in, one thing is clear. We're living in a time where careless analogies can carry enormous weight. And sometimes it takes a sharp-tongued commentator like Maher to pull the emergency brake before a bad idea becomes accepted wisdom. The debate over what Goldberg said will likely continue, popping up in op-eds, political campaigns, and dinner table discussions. But maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe uncomfortable conversations, when done right, are how progress happens. Maybe the tension between passion and precision is exactly what keeps public discourse honest. Or maybe it's just another reminder that in a world full of noise, clarity is more powerful than ever.